Well, ladies and gentlemen, as promised, I have another fantastic guest. This is going to be a real fun one for you, folks. We have veteran Frank Demith, and he's also an author of not one, but two fantastic books. First one is Of Vital Interest. I can highly recommend that for you. And we have a new one coming out, the sequel in the series, Defending the Ego. But before we get going, as we always do in the Lima Charlie Show, Frank, I'll do a fun little radio check. So, Frank, this is Rob. How do you read me? Over.
Leave it, Charlie, brother.
Yeah, there we go. Love it, love it. And I love your book, and I definitely want to get into that. We'll get into the weeds, and this is great Christmas shopping gifts too for the folks in your family out there listening. You want to definitely pick up a couple copies of these books. But before we do that, let's time travel just a little bit, just a few years. We'll go back to before you joined the service. I'm really interested in what were the decisions that you made or made for you that led to you joining? Not just, I want to know about the branch, why that came along, the job, and how the first little bit of time went for you in the service.
Sure. Well, back when I joined, you could join in two ways. You could join voluntarily or involuntarily, and there was actually people who joined rather than uh, doing time. So the judge would say, "Okay, I'll let you go, but you got to go talk to the recruiter." That's not how I joined, but that did exist back then.
Right.
So I joined right out of high school. I had put together a packet, or I'd started a packet to apply for the military academy. And I started it too late, didn't have enough time, didn't know anybody, no politicians knew me. I was a kid from the south side of Chicago. So I just enlisted and went through basic training. They pull us aside and said, "Hey, you need to take a test." Like, okay, everybody's taking tests. So we went and took a test. There's about 14 of us the first time. And then the next week they said, pulled out 8 of us and said, "You got to go fill out some paperwork." And by that time, we'd been in basic training for a while. So one of the soldiers was brave enough to ask what we were doing. And the drill sergeant turned around and said, "Oh, you knuckleheads are going to fill out paperwork to go to the prep school for West Point." And 3 of them just turned around and went back to the formation. They had no desire. So I went and filled out the paperwork and I forgot about it. And all the rest of basic training and went on to my advanced individual training. And I had been in AIT for about weeks. And I was notified that I had to go down to the commander's office. And I'm like, oh, geez, what did I do? And my supervisor's like, "I don't know. They just said you needed to go down to his office." And it was a major. And so I walked in and I reported, saluted and, "Sir, Specialist Demith reports." And he says, "Do you know why you're here, Specialist Demith?" I said, "No, sir. I must have done something wrong, but honestly, I don't know what it is." And he started laughing. And he said, "Do you remember filling out paperwork when you were in basic training?" And I said, "I filled out a lot of paperwork, sir." He says, "Well, I was just notified that you've been accepted to go to the preparatory school for West Point."
Nice.
And I said, "Well, okay, thank you, sir." And he says, "There's one bad thing." He says, "This is a 23-week long course, and you have to be MOS certified before you go." And he says, "You have about 2 months before you have to report." And I said, "Well, sir, it looks like I'm not going." He says, "Nope. You're going to be the first person to accelerate through advanced individual training."
Oh, that's great.
I'm like, I thought that was a good thing, but then, I mean, I was in AIT courses all day long. And I don't mean like 8 hours. I mean 12, 14 hours, weekends, everything. I had no time. And I finally finished, and they had the little ceremony in the commander's office and gave me my certificate. And then the next day I had to clear and head up to New Jersey for prep school.
Yeah.
And I didn't add that I enlisted as a bandsman. Your mic's on.
I was gonna ask you what the first MOS was. So you were
Yeah.
that's fantastic.
Well, and it was funny because when I got to basic training, I was a PFC, and nobody was a PFC.
Right.
And so the drill sergeants asked me one day toward the beginning of the basic training, Demith, how are you a PFC when everybody else is a E1 or E2? And I said, well, stripes for skills, drill sergeant. He said, what? I said, stripes for skills, drill sergeant. He said, what kind of skill do you have, Demith? And I said, well, I'm going to be a bandsman. You're going to be what? And I said, well, I'm going to be in the band. I passed the audition. He goes, hey, drill sergeants, we got a flute tutor over here. Oh my God. And they made me permanent row guard. So that was fun. And then every time I saw my drill sergeant, to hum the Budweiser song. Bum, 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 bum. And, and it was okay. I mean, it was fun. But I got him back toward the end of basic training when we went to the rifle range once. And I was doing ammo detail because I had already qualified. I was a pretty good shot. And I grew up in Chicago. So I'm carrying the empty cans to go and restock them. And my drill sergeants are standing next to the company commander. And so I get about 5 feet from him. I start doing the Budweiser song. And the commander turns around, he goes, soldier, what are you doing? And I said, well, it's the Budweiser song, sir. And the drill sergeants are standing behind him going, no, don't say anything. And he said, why are you doing that? I said, well, the drill sergeants told me, sir, every time I see him, I got to do it. Oh, they did they? He says, carry on. And I walked away and I could hear him. What are you doing? Now you can't be doing it. Got into formation to march back to the barracks. My drill sergeant looked at me as soon as we took one step off to head back. He says, Demith, rounders. And I ran rounders the entire time back to the barracks, and they dogged me out.
Oh man.
Yeah.
I love those stories. Holy cow. So what would have been the original length of your AIT school?
23 weeks.
23. Okay. And they
And
can
I finished it in 12, I think.
wow. Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was tough. I mean, people don't realize how good the military bandsmen are. I mean, my God, in the Navy, I think it was, you had to play 2 instruments.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm a big
And
advocate for the bands, especially in the last few years. The pandemic introduced
yeah.
a lot of us to them through social media because they weren't allowed to do live performances for a while. And if you listen to the show from time to time, we play a lot of it because I'm blown away by the skills. I really am. It's
Well, and it's not a cakewalk to pass the audition, but I had done really well, and I was in the Band of America. I had auditioned for that, and I got accepted into that. So
wow.
I played well. In fact, I was playing professionally before I joined the military. I was in a band that played around the parties and other things, and probably playing in places that we shouldn't have been.
Yeah. I've said this before on air. I mean, it is the most disciplined musicians you'll find in the world.
Oh yeah.
And you would think that those two worlds wouldn't connect, and I've had
Well,
yeah.
and the funniest thing that happened to me, well, there's 2 funny things that happened to me in AIT. One, they had beer machines in the barracks, just like a soda machine.
I miss that era. Come on.
Oh yeah, but this is in the mid 70s.
Yeah.
So I'm standing there in the men's room, and there's a young man next to me in the men's room as well, and I'm talking to him, and the next thing I know, he's laying on the floor. Everybody, the beer machine ran out quickly. And then the other one is, we used to sit out on the beach. And the Marines used to go there for amphibious training.
Mm.
And so we sit on the beach, and it was almost like MASH. We're up there cheering for them and everything, and they get mad at us and chase us off. It was a hoot.
Their DIs are making them all into sugar cookies, and you're just kicking one back.
Yeah.
That's
well,
great.
there was no, back when I went to AIT, there were no drill sergeants, because at that time, they have them now in the School of Music, but at that time there was nobody.
Yeah.
So we went from, full on drill sergeant terror to, and went to AIT, and there was nobody. I mean, we walked to the school and went to class, and
Yeah.
it was like a complete switch change.
Yeah. Yeah. My time in was in the 90s for boot camp, and we had 3 DIs for basic and only 1 for AIT.
Yep.
And you really didn't get, the term used to be smoked, when they really go nuts on you. You really didn't get smoked much unless you were that soldier that deserved to be smoked.
Well, and the funny part was that you went there on your own travel. So there was no way to meet you when you got there.
Oh,
you
that's
go
interesting.
to a certain building,
Yeah.
and you go there, and there's a guy sitting there in blue jeans at the desk. Say, "Hey, man, are you here for AIT?" "Yes, I am." Says, "Calm down. There's nobody here. It's just us."
That's fantastic. Yeah, I remember the bus trip for me was from South Carolina to, it was Fort Jackson to Fort Lee, Virginia.
Yep.
And the DI gets on the bus and yells just like they did at basic training. Get out of here. Da, 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 da. And then you get your room assignments, you go there, and then there's the same guys there yelling at you. Da, 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 da. Okay, y'all got free time till dinner. And it was like 1 o'clock in the afternoon. I'm like, what? I thought that was lax, but we didn't have no beer machine. I mean, that would have been,
oh man, it was
like a
it was
sandal
on a
resort.
Navy base though. I went to AIT on a Navy base, Little Creek Amphibious Base, and the School of Music is still there.
Yeah, that's great.
And when I had a choice when I left, I went to basic training at Fort Leonard Wood, and they gave me a choice. They said, you can fly, and we'll provide you the ticket, or we'll give you the travel money, and you find your own way to get there. And I said, well, how much is a bus ticket? And the bus ticket was like $100 less. I said, well, I'll take the bus. It stopped at every little town. It took me 3 days
to
get from Fort Leonard Wood to Norfolk, Virginia.
Yeah, Fort Lawson Woods, we used to call that one. Yeah.
Oh my God! If I had the chance to do one thing over again, I would have took the plane.
Yeah. That's awesome. Oh, that's great. Well, speaking of travel, I mean, as a bandsman, how did that work for you? I think a lot of our listeners would be fascinated by what that role is once you're at your duty station. But of course, you had the academy too. So however you want to give us the details of how a year or two went for you.
In the band, they have gigs just like a regular band. Mm-hmm. And so they do their ceremonial things on post, and then they'll go and play like at schools or other places or functions. And they'll all get on the bus and put their instruments in and travel and get to the place, set up and play. And it's almost, it's not exactly the same as being a professional musician, because I mean, you still have duties and everything, but it's the closest thing you'll find on a similar path with a civilian role. And they're just, it amazes me how well they play. It's just amazing. But I was supposed to go to the Fifth Army Band at Fort Sam down in San Antonio.
Okay.
And I never had a chance to really do anything. I mean, I had to go off to Fort Monmouth as soon as I finished my course. Mm-hmm. So.
And then you went to the academy. You were probably the most well-prepared student there, because you had just done double academics.
Yeah. Well, I went to the prep school first. That was in Fort Monmouth, New Jersey.
Oh, gotcha. Okay. Yeah.
And they didn't tell us that if you got into the prep school, 99% chance that you're getting a appointment to the academy. When we got there, they said, you're going to have to bust your ass and you're going to have to do everything and show us that you're worthy of an appointment. It's like, okay. So I was there for 10 months and it was so neat. I mean, it was getting progressively better.
Yeah.
So when I got to Fort Monmouth, I had gone home and got my car and I drove it to Fort Monmouth. And you had 4 classes a day, 2 English classes and 2 math classes. Because the goal of the prep school is to raise your scores high enough so you're able to go into the academy and be competitive. And then we had another, about half of the people that were there were people right out of high school. And most of them were athletes. And they were there for the same reason. So we kind of, you found a way to make it work. It was kind of funny because the people out of high school went to basic training and then they went directly to the prep school. So they had no job specialty. And we were different, but we were the same. And it's hard to explain because there was a lot of people who were E5s, sergeants, when they went to the prep school. I was an E4, and had I gone to a unit, that's another thing about the band, you get promoted again when you get to the unit. So you're either a sergeant or whatever slot you're filling.
Yeah.
So I was an E4, and I had my little medals that I had already earned, and we did 10 months of the prep school, and then we all went into the academy together. It brought us on a bus, and we were there the night before everybody else got there. And so we stayed with other cadets that night. Then we got up and we moved over to the Beast Barracks part. And I don't know about all the rest of my classmates from the prep school, but when I got to my area, the squad leader said, "New Cadet Demith, are you prior service?" I said, "Yes, ma'am." She goes, "Go upstairs. You don't need to go to drill and ceremony training." So I just sat up there putting my stuff away, and I was looking out the window, and all the people in my big Beast Barracks unit are out there getting grilled. And so the only thing I had to do that day was go to the ceremony where we got sworn in, and then everybody started the same after that.
Yeah.
But that was fun. That was my second shot at basic training.
Yeah, that's cool. Yeah.
Yeah, it was fun. It's hard to believe, and I still today, I'm not. I wouldn't even think I was a West Point grad. If someone meets me on the street, they're kind of like, "You're a West Point grad?" I said, "Yep." But I never thought that I would get there. And then it was just someplace I was supposed to be, I guess, because I didn't even know they had a prep school for enlisted people.
Yeah, it's a rare thing. They tested and pulled a few of you aside and said, "Look,
Yeah.
you guys
Oh,
get
and nobody else from my basic training company made it.
Oh, no kidding.
Nah, I never seen any of those people again.
Yeah. So there you go. It was meant to be. So then how did the rest of those however many months or years go, and then what evolved
Well,
after that?
that's another funny part, because I mean, after doing English and math for 10 months, I was in a higher level of math.
Yeah.
And so when I started at the academy, I was at like the very top of the math classes. And every week I dropped down to the next one, because they were just going so fast. I couldn't keep up with them. And by the time the year was over, I was in the basic math class where I belonged, and
Yeah.
uh, and back then we didn't have computers. There was one computer, and that was you would go in and log in for your physical training classes, and it had the big dot matrix printer, and so
Yeah, the green and white stripes with the little
oh yeah,
ribbon
yeah, and
holes
you
on
had
the
to
side. Yeah.
tear off the page and fold it up and give it to the instructor. And I they told us when I got to my English class that you had to handwrite your paper, cursive. So I did, well, first of all, I printed it, my first paper, and I brought it in and I handed it to Demith. Did you not understand the requirement? This has to be in cursive. And I said, sir, I can. He goes, nope. He said, you have till the end of the day, or you're going to get a failing grade. I said, okay. So I went back to my room and I hand wrote the paper, but I put the printed one in the folder too, and carried it with me. And I got there and I handed him the cursive, and he looks at it, and he goes, do you still have the printed version? I said, yes, sir, here you go. And for the rest of the time, I was able to just do printed work. My handwriting is atrocious.
Yeah, that's fantastic.
I have trouble reading it myself.
Yeah, my mother said once, my handwriting is the equivalent. She goes, you really should you should be a doctor with that penmanship. That
Yep.
chicken scratch.
Oh, I was terrible. I was never a good writer. My sister, she was very good at writing cursive. She was 4 years younger than me though, so I couldn't use her a lot when I was in high school.
Yeah. Yeah, that's great. So then what evolved after that? Some of the fun shenanigans or adventures?
Oh man, I was so busy trying to keep my head above water. I never got an A in any course. I came close in law, believe it or not. And I was doing so bad in the other classes that I put law off to the side and studied for the other ones for the final. And I got a C in my final, and the law instructor was so mad at me he wouldn't even talk to me. He thought I was going to get an A, and gave me a B. And then I played lacrosse when I was at school.
Oh, cool.
And I never played lacrosse before, but I wanted to do something because I couldn't stand being on the company tables because you got harassed really bad during meals. And so I played lacrosse, and I did that for the first 2 years. I sat on company tables.
Hmm.
And then, but my grade point average, my first semester grade point average was a 1.2.
Oh,
And so I didn't fail anything, but
yeah,
I got all bad grades.
yeah,
So I started thinking to myself, I probably ought to try to do better in academics. So I left playing sports and focused on academics. I ended up with like a 2.6 or something, like a B minus.
yeah. Yeah, but still, you were pulled out of the ranks of a general basic training.
Yep.
The odds were against just that as an opportunity by itself is phenomenal. And then, like you said, you were the only one that actually made it through. I mean, that's incredible odds. So, yeah, congratulations on that. That's
No,
cool
thanks.
because they saw something in you. Obviously, on your test was what military has to start figuring out something from data. But then on top of that, you must have had someone that said, "Yeah, give them a shot." There must have been someone along the way that nudged you to get to that opportunity.
Well, if you remember back then, the volunteer army had only been around for 3 or 4 years,
True. Yeah.
and they didn't have restrictions on
Hmm.
on recruiting.
Yeah.
So just being a high school grad was a big plus.
True. Yeah, that's true.
And I did pretty well in academics in high school, so I know I did well on the ASVAB,
Yeah. No. So
but
then
I
after,
didn't have a record, so that put me another
yeah.
peg up.
Right. So then after the academy, what was your first how did that go after that?
Well, I was commissioned in air defense, and so I went to Fort Bliss.
Oh, okay.
I don't know what they call it now. I don't keep up with the new names,
Mm.
but it's the one in El Paso.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah. Fort Bliss is how I remember it. I don't know the new one either.
Yeah, I know. I can't. I don't. And some people get upset. It's like it's been Fort Bliss to me for 30 plus years. So, my God. And from there I got stationed at Fort Stewart in a short range air defense unit, which was a hoot. I walked into there. My first command was a platoon leader in a red eye platoon. The most worthless air defense weapon ever made. Just you it had to have an IR source, but it couldn't find the IR source incoming.
Yeah.
So you had to wait till it dropped all of its ordnance and then focus on it and pick up the tail IR source as it flew away. And the maneuver commanders would get so mad. It's like, why do I need you? They already blew up my stuff, and now you're going to shoot it. So then from there, I went to Chaparral, and that was a really good system. It just didn't have a lot of range.
Mm.
And I never got to be in Vulcan, but the Vulcan's another one, a big 20 millimeter machine gun on an armored chassis. The problem is the cyclic rate of the gun was so fast that he only had so many rounds.
Mm.
Then he'd have to run away and go in the woods and hand crank more rounds into the barrel, and
Mm.
not the best system either. But and then from there I went to back to the advanced course, and I got put into a Patriot battalion, and that was a great experience.
Yeah.
And we all went to Germany together, and I was the S4. So I was in charge of all the railhead operations and they had brand new Casern for our unit only, brand new buildings, mess hall, motor pool, everything.
Yeah.
And I had to sign for that. Plus, I had to sign for 2 initial readiness positions. And the third unit was what we call the motor pool unit. And they would sit in there, and when we got an alert, they moved out from the motor pool to whatever location they had to be at.
Hmm.
And after a year or so as an S4, I became a battery commander, and I did that for probably 2.5 years.
Yeah. Still in Germany? That would have been
Yep,
was that
yep. We were in
Frankfurt or what was it?
Ansbach,
Oh, Hansbach.
Ansbach,
Yeah.
and I left. This is another good one. My battery eventually became the best battery in the battalion, and we even won 32nd Army Air Defense Command awards
That's awesome.
for my battery. And I had a great first sergeant. My God, one of the finest NCOs I've ever worked with. And I was a smart, so he'd have good ideas, and I'd say okay, and then we'd do well. And so I left. I left the day the air war started in the Gulf
Oh, no
in
kidding.
'91.
Yeah.
And I had received my orders, and I was married at the time. We had one child, and my wife had left. She had gone back to El Paso. And so I was there, and I got my orders, and I said, yeah, I'm not going to do this. I took the orders and laid them on my desk and kept on working. And a week out from when I was supposed to leave, the brigade contacted my battalion and asked them where my clearing papers were. And so the XO calls me up, and he goes, Frank, where's your clearing papers? I said, they're right there on my desk. He says, well, you got to clear. And I said, we're going to war, sir. I'm not going anywhere. He goes, well, yes, you are. You have orders. What part of that don't you get? And so I had to hurry up and clear. And I got on that plane. That was the worst feeling I've ever had. Was
Yeah.
the only people on the plane with me. There was maybe two other folks in uniform, and then everybody else were dependents.
Yeah.
And I felt about knee high to a grasshopper.
Mm.
I mean, it was just a terrible feeling.
Mhm.
And I got back and I did another 2.5 years as a commander of a recruiting company. So I did 5 years straight as a commander,
Yeah.
as a captain, and my marriage didn't last.
Yeah.
I mean, it was I that kind of grounded down and ended up, but there was other issues. And
Yeah.
then I went off into the civilian world. I resigned my commission and I got out. But before I left, I had signed up for the Active Guard and Reserve program.
Sure.
And I got a call one day. I worked as a business form and label salesman
Okay.
in San Antonio.
Okay.
That's where we decided to live. And I got this call one day, and this person on the other end is like, so where do you want to go? You want to go here, here, or here? And I'm like, who are you? And he says, well, I'm warrant officer so-and-so. I said, okay, what does this have to do with anything? He goes, you've been selected to go in the AGR program, and I need to know where you want to go. I said, okay, what was the positions? He told me. I said, well, I'll give you a call tomorrow and I'll let you know. He goes, no, you got to tell me today. And if you don't tell me by 3 o'clock, you're going to go to the bottom of the pile and you may not get an assignment.
Yeah.
I said, well, I got to talk to my wife. We are still married. And so I called her up and I said, dear, I got something I got to tell you. And she didn't know I had signed up for the AGR program. And so I signed up for this thing and I got selected. Here's the choices. And there was no sound on the other end of the phone.
Yeah.
I said, are you still there? And in Spanish, she told me that and some other things that I didn't want to hear. And so we ended up going back to Fort Monmouth.
Mhm.
And I went there as my first assignment as a AGR officer and be in the reserves. Nothing's ever planned. So they send me there. They send me to a unit that's deactivating. So I moved, and they didn't tell me. And so I moved all my stuff, my family, everything.
Just to
We
close
get
it up.
there.
Just to close
Yeah,
it
we
up.
get
Yeah.
there. Yeah, we get there. In the first week I was there, people are starting to pack stuff up.
Yeah.
And I'm like, what's going on? He goes, oh, we're deactivating in 9 months. Oh, that's nice. So
Explain
I
that one
went
to the
from,
family. Yeah.
yeah. So I went from there. Where did I go next? From there, I went to Waco, Texas.
Hmm.
And I was there. And then I went from Waco to, I was in Fifth Army. And then from Fifth Army, I went up to Fort Knox, and I was a brigade reserve operations officer in a recruiting brigade. And then from there, I went to AR PERSCOM in St. Louis. It was still called that back then. And I only spent like 14 months there. And then I was by name selected to go to the Pentagon. And that was my last assignment on active duty.
Hmm.
And that's where I had the packet laid on my desk for the interpreter translator program that I helped develop.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a fascinating thing, which of course, with your writing, there's some fun things that connect those worlds. So That's fantastic. What a story. And you would have never saw that coming as a kid in a band. So you're
No.
gonna work with all those different fields, all those different commands and
Well, I wasn't even planning on staying in the Army when I
right.
first enlisted. I was going in to get the college fund and then go to college because my parents couldn't afford to send me to college and I had no money.
Yeah.
So my whole goal was to get funded to go to college. And
And that you did in the best one. Yeah.
oh, I have to pinch myself
Yeah.
still sometimes.
Yeah, I don't think the general public understands how the academies work. We've talked about it a few times on the show, but it's a huge honor to get selected and a lot of folks are like, well, what's the tuition? If we want to just send somebody, what's the they don't understand the whole the
Oh,
mechanism.
the people that were in my class, I mean, it's like a who's who of
Yeah.
America. I'm so honored to be part of that class. It just makes me proud every time I think about it. General Miller was in my class.
Oh, no kidding. Uh-huh.
Yeah, Scotty Miller.
Yeah.
Um, Kathy Hildreth.
Hmm.
She's in my class. One of the I don't know where she falls in Forbes list, but she's way up toward the top, and just a wonderful person too.
Right.
And then every one of my classmates was just amazing. I used to run at the academy. I'd go out and run the hills. I'd do like 7 miles, and I'd just stop and I'd sit up on top looking out over the Hudson River, and it's like, how the hell did I get here?
Hmm.
What am I doing here? What? I don't know.
Yeah. Well, God put you where you were supposed to be. That's part of the high command had a plan for you. So
Absolutely.
all
I
right,
I
so
believe that.
yeah. So walk us through now what happened when you actually did leave transition, how that time went. And of course, we got to talk about, how you became this incredibly talented author. Of course, I'm going to guess that the double English classes a day had something to do with that. But yeah, walk us through those early days and the move, and then how that all came about to you
Yeah.
writing these books.
Well, when I was in the Pentagon, and I thought I was destined to get promoted again. I worked for a active component general officer who gave me a 1 block as a reservist.
Wow.
It is something that hardly you never see
Yeah,
that.
that's very rare. Yeah.
Yeah, the active duty people get the 1 blocks, and I
Yeah.
was flabbergasted.
Hmm.
And it was because of the program that I managed. Um, but I got passed over, and he was livid. And he said, "I'm going to find out what happened. This has to be a mistake."
Yeah.
And so he got me an appointment with, with the officer management person in OCAR, Office of the Chief Army Reserve. And I went over, and it was a full colonel, and he sat down and looked at my file, and he goes, "Well, it's obvious why you didn't get promoted." And I said, "Well, why is that, sir?" He says, "You didn't meet the requirements." I said, thinking to myself, I got a 1 block from an active duty general officer. You know, he goes, "Well, there's 3 things that you needed to do. You could have done either one of them, and you didn't do any of them. And they were symposiums. They're like a conference.
Huh.
There was a security conference I could have went to, and it was like 3 days long. And had I done that, I would have been a shoo-in."
Hmm.
And I sat there and I thought about it, and it's like, how can this be? How can your work performance not be more important than some stupid class?
Hmm.
And then the other one was the master's degree. I stopped my master's degree halfway through because I realized that the colleges I was going to were just diploma mills.
Yeah.
And they had this joint classes, and everybody got the same grade. And it's like some people wouldn't do anything. And it's like, nah, I can't do that. That's not legitimate.
Hmm.
And then there was some other course too that I could have done, but I didn't know any of it. My assignments officer didn't say anything, not a single word. And so the colonel I was talking to looked at me and he says, well, you'll definitely get promoted if you do these classes. I said, sir, these classes have all expired for this year. He goes, oh yeah, you'll get passed over again, but you can do it. I said, it's not me to be a two-time passover. I'm not. That's not me. I've worked hard and been successful all along the way, and I'm not going to get passed over again. So I decided to retire, and I retired, much to the chagrin of a lot of people that I worked with who thought I should stay. And I went off and I was a deputy director for the linguist contract
Hmm.
for the Department of Defense. And people don't understand how much money. I mean, we were spending over $1 billion a year on linguists.
Wow.
Yeah.
And that was
So that
back when
was,
$1 billion was $1 billion.
oh yeah, that was back in 2008. And
Yeah.
that was a lot of money. And then we lost the contract and they wanted me to go with the new company. And I asked them, well, what about all my staff? Because had quite a few people that work for me. And they said, well, it's just for management people. And I said, that's not for me. They said, what do you mean? And I said, well, I can't leave and my people aren't taken care of. So I found one of the supervisors that worked for me and I told him, I said, you need to apply for this. You're getting married. You don't want to live in your in-laws' house the rest of your life. Apply for this job and I'll recommend you for it. So he did and he got it. So I went off, worked for Booz Allen, went back into the Pentagon, and I was back in the program again, working with people that I had worked with before. So that went well. And I worked for a couple of other companies. And then all along, I was looking for someone to write a story, write a book, do something about the program that I had set up for the interpreter translators. And nothing. Crickets. So when I retired from the civilian world, civilian workforce, I sat down and I started thinking about it. I said, well, I could do this. So I wrote out a good outline, character sketches and everything, and took me 90 days to write the first book.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, from start to finish.
Yeah.
And I thought it was pretty good.
Yeah.
I mean, I didn't know what good was, but I thought the story was good. So I found a publisher, and of course they're like, "Oh yeah, this can be great." Never telling me that the average book only sells between 250 and 300 copies.
Yeah.
So I sunk about 10 grand into publishing it. And right before it was released, they had sent the manuscript in for a book contest. And they called me up about 3 weeks after the book was released, and they said, you won. And I said, I won what? I said, your book has been named the best military book in 2023.
Yeah.
Like, gee.
And not just that, because I saw that. And I mean, congratulations, but not just that, but it's also in the category of international
Yeah.
impact books, which is
Yeah,
more
the
competitive state.
contest was called,
Yeah.
the group was called International Impact Book Award.
Yep.
And so I had to fly to Phoenix, me and the house commander had to go to a black tie function. And they gave me this, I wish I would have brought it up here. They gave me this funny looking trophy. It looks like an upside down question mark. If you hold it upside down, it looks just like a question mark.
Yeah.
It's like, yeah, what the heck am I doing here? And it was kind of neat because that was my first time being in a function. with people that I normally probably would not be around,
Mm.
because I'm learning really quick that the author world is not as divergent as the military. Um, a lot of authors are way on the other end of the spectrum from where I'm at.
Mm.
So, I bet they're all good people. I mean, I don't.
Yeah.
Um,
Well,
it's just been
it's a big
fun.
it's a big space, but the fact that you were in that category for international impact and military books, your book clearly was, standing out among all of them.
Yeah.
So it would make sense that the authors, majority of them were on a different mindset of, so that.
Well, we've also had really good ratings.
Mhm.
I mean, it was released in December of 23, and we've have 4.5 rating on Goodreads.
Yeah,
We've got a 5.0 reading in Barnes and Noble,
yeah,
and the 4.8 on Amazon.
yeah. That's where
And
I
we
picked
just
up. That's where I picked up as Barnes and Nobles, and you're right. There's a nice thing on their site for you too. There's a nice published rating for it.
well, we also got a positive review from Kirkus,
Hmm.
and Kirkus is known for giving less than positive reviews. They're very tough.
Yeah.
And we also just got a 4.5 stars from the historical fiction company, which is another award that I'm up for.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Mhm. Mhm.
Been a wild ride.
Yeah, yeah. Well, like I said, I highly recommend it, folks. You want to pick up a copy, we'll have links on our site if you can't find it directly on his. But and then on top of that, you've been busy. I see you've been busy because you're getting ready to just around this time we're broadcasting here is the launch of your newest book. So
Yep, my
give us a sneak preview without spoilers. How's that?
okay. Well, if anybody's read the first book, there's an excerpt in there for the start of book two. We find our protagonist is still um he has another request to do things that aren't involved with his normal everyday job. He goes off and does that, and when they leave Iraq, everybody is ready to go this time. It's turns out to be another very difficult time, even though it's only a matter of a few months. And he will meet someone uh, that will be in the follow-on books. He's developing a relationship. So there's this book is geared a lot toward veterans. They'll as you read it, you'll notice a lot of things that most veterans experience.
Yeah. Oh,
More
absolutely.
most more specifically, bad leadership.
Yeah, 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 yeah. I picked up quite a bit of that, and the GWAT era that I'm in, this global war on
Yeah,
terror era. All of us can remember because we all had translators. Every unit I was ever part of over there, um, detached or otherwise, all of them had translators, and there's a lot of interesting things that for like I was with an infantry unit, so your assumptions of people when you're over there is different. There's less trust if you have someone embedded with you that's not, but it's interesting to read the way you write out because you really do, as a veteran, you start to think about what that program that you ran must have been like to get to the point
no,
where you did have this for units, right? I mean, without it, our jobs would have been way more difficult. And yeah, we had some interesting interactions from time to time,
yeah,
but the reality is these people were risking their lives to help us with our mission. One way or the other, they were risking their lives. So
Well, and the thing that the thing that I tell everybody, because I've had a lot of comments on, both sides of the coin with the program we developed. But it's just a military occupational specialty, just like any other one. There's soldiers in it that are exceptional. There's a lot of soldiers that are average, and there's some soldiers who aren't up to standards. And it's the same with anything. You could do the same thing with field artillery, air defense, infantry.
anything, yeah, mechanics, cooks, the whole nine.
Right,
Everybody. There's always that. Yeah, yeah.
right. And the interesting thing, I had a language and culture background before I got handed the folder that drove the program. And that the program was a direct tasking from the Secretary of Defense to the services. And the Army was just the only one who picked it up and ran with it. And the rest of them were like, oh, we can't do this. We can't do this. It's too hard.
Yeah, yeah.
And the funny part was, I had just gotten to the Pentagon and I found a folder on my desk. My job in the Pentagon was an accessions analyst, and I oversaw recruiting in the National Guard and Army Reserve. And so I came into work this one day, and there's a folder on my desk, and I opened it up and looked at it and read through it. And then on the front of the thing, it said, "See me if you have any questions." And it was signed by the general officer who ran the office I was in. So I got my supervisor, who was a colonel. I said, I think I need to go and talk to the boss because I don't have no idea what this is or what he wants to do with it. He goes, okay. So we went over and talked to him. And he goes, Frank, why did it take you so long to get here? He figured it. And this is like a day or two after he dropped the folder. And I said, well, sir, I just wanted to make sure that I get the right direction on this. I said, where would you like us to try to take this? Because the requirement was to recruit individuals with Dari, Pashto, Arabic, or Farsi language skills into the IRR, not even active, reserve, and then mobilize them from the IRR and send them overseas to help as linguists. So he said, take it as far as you can. And boy, that's not the right thing to tell me. That's
not for a kid from the east side of Chicago, at least.
Yeah, oh no. That opens up all kinds of possibilities, and my eyes lit up. I was happier than anything. So I went back to my desk and I started looking over it because there was already work that started to be done, but it was really, preliminary stuff, and they had one class that was already down at Fort Jackson going through training, but it was OSIT at that time. And so there was civilians in the Pentagon that were involved in it, and I was the only military person in the Pentagon that worked on this.
Wow.
So just like so many military people do when they're in that environment, they just kind of take control. So make a long story short, we went from recruiting into the IRR to recruiting for active duty, Army Reserve, and National Guard. We had 2 units in the active component, and then 1 unit each in the Guard and Reserve. And before I left, we had received a directive from the Secretary of Defense's office to expand it to the other combatant commands. So we were in the process of really ramping this up, where every combatant command would have their own interpreter translators. And once I left, it was curtailed. And there's nobody really left to fight for it. And that's one of the reasons why I wrote the book, because we had over 1,500 individuals who joined the Army under this program.
Mhm.
And, just like any other time when the country calls upon its immigrants to support actions, they came and no questions went off. And it was the only occupational specialty where the individuals who joined knew that they were going to be deployed overseas. No doubt. And it would be right after advanced individual training. So we actually sat in a big conference room in the Pentagon. When a class was getting ready to graduate, we would take them name by name and we would align them to units.
Yeah.
And then their orders would be cut and they would report to that unit to support them.
Yeah.
Because there was no unit at that time for them to go to. They were being added to rosters in other units.
Mhm. Yeah, I can tell you. So I was attached to an infantry unit. It was all male in 2004 when we went to I think when we were in Baghdad, and I can remember there was an attachment of a National Guard female soldier,
Yep.
which was a big deal because we were all male. So the command and everyone's like, "Well, wait a minute, wait a minute, wait, whoa, whoa, whoa!" But she
Yeah.
had like 2 or 3 languages, skill sets, and they sent her over, and there was a lot of resistance initially because of I mean, it's a
Oh yeah.
male unit. There's things you do have to be considering, and it was at a time of very high tempo. It was 2004. It was like the first election standing up. It was the Iraqi National Guard being trained by us for the first time. So you had a lot of really, really big things happening. And then on top of that, you're going to throw a female into the unit. We got to accommodate. We got to get a reporter down. We got to do all those things. And the point I'm trying to make is that we realized the value of that was incredible
Yep.
because now when we were going into what we call the villages or the mahalas over there, and you're talking to families and you're separating the male and the female and you're trying to respect their culture, right? Their religious culture, their community culture. Now all of a sudden you had a female that could talk to the females.
Right.
And it's like box of rocks. Like not everyone got the value of that right away until we started actually doing patrols. And then, oh yeah, we could call in and have someone come out.
Yep.
And I'll tell you, the length of time of, we'll say, investigating or whatever, talking to people, um, the length of time that the patrols were got shortened, the length of times of doing the door knocking and all that. So you don't have well, again, this is just my little view from my little time there, but having that program, I mean, I can't see why it took so long, and I can't understand why they
Yeah.
got rid of it in that
Well,
fashion later.
the aggravating part, we had a meeting once and actually had a general officer stand up and address the crowd and tell everybody that as soon as we were out of Iraq, this unit and MOS would go away.
Yeah.
And I mean, I was at that point in time, I was on a recall orders. They brought me back on retiree recall for 2.5 years, and so I'm a lieutenant colonel, and I'm sitting out there representing ASA MNRA, and we were in charge of it. And I stood up. And I said, "Well, sir, that's not actually completely accurate."
Yeah.
He says, "Who are you?" And I told him, I said, my name is this, and I work for the Assistant Secretary of the Army for Manpower and Reserve Affairs. And we've got directives to expand the program, not to take it down. He goes, "Well, there won't be any need for them." And it just shocks me how of leadership could not understand the need. And there's over 20 countries in the world whose first or second language is Arabic. And to think that there's not going to be a need to be in those places again is just ludicrous.
Yeah. To me, that's absence of experience because I mean, it's just so obvious, right?
Well, and in defense of the proponent was military intelligence.
Mhm.
And so in their defense, they did a great job being a proponent, you know, for years. And they were a reluctant proponent, but they did everything that was asked and did a darn good job as
Yeah.
well. But for them to not have the foresight to look forward and see how positive the expansion could have been for all the other combatant commands, instead of, you know, going this in Southcom and trying to find someone at the last minute who speaks
Yeah.
some level of, it's just, it just didn't make any sense to me.
And this is
And
where
the
I,
worst part is I was the one that helped start this. I know where those slots came from
Mhm.
that were used to set up the units. They were not MI slots.
Right.
We got those slots from Big Army in the slush pool, the additional slots that they haven't used. And the Army provided the manpower slots for the units. Nothing was taken out of military intelligence.
Yeah.
And but the bad thing is, but I think when that happened, they convinced the people in force modernization to let them use the slots for other military intelligence structures,
Yeah. And
which they shouldn't have been able to do. But
yeah, and where I get aggravated with this is it's once again an example of and I'm gonna be a little offensive to some of your past colleagues, but I'm just gonna say it the way I see it. You were the only military person in that team at the Pentagon. So here's my biggest grievance of the way things are run at that level. You don't have enough experience in the room. I'm not saying it has to be just military.
I know,
That'd be a dumb statement. But you can't have one military and the rest civilians and think you're coming up with a really good critical thought, you know,
yeah,
battle plan there. So you're once again weakening the military strength of being prepared for the next 2, 3, 4 campaigns. You can't just snap your fingers and find all the resources you need when a
right,
new campaign starts off. We end up in, pick your country, Syria, Jordan, whatever. You can't just say, oh, well, now all of a sudden we need, 80 people that have the skill set.
yeah,
No, they have to be in and they have to be training and they have to be up to speed so that so that their experience aids the mission, not
yep,
hinders it. So it's frustrating. I think for all veterans,
yeah.
especially those of us that spend some time in these different campaigns, it's like, I understand my own ignorance going in there. A lot of us were like, oh, what do we need that for? And then you see it in action, you're like, oh, duh.
Yeah.
We should have had this the whole time.
Well, and the other part that was frustrating is we would get comments back from both the units that were utilizing the soldiers, and then comments from the soldiers as well. And a lot of the interpreter translators, they would go to units that didn't understand, what they could do,
Yeah,
and so they would put them on gate guard all the time. And they would talk to people as they came in, but they weren't really using them to their
yeah,
full potential. And
yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, it's frustrating. Like I said, we once we understood it, it was a
Yep.
daily thing. They were on patrols. They were on multiple patrols every day. I can
Right.
tell you that. They either went
Well, the
proactively on a patrol because they knew they were
yep.
doing some door knocking, or they were on standby with what we used to call our QRF or some type of gate patrol
Right.
that they're ready to go out to respond to something. Yeah.
Yep. We had the protagonist in my book, Sergeant Abdullah. Of course, it's a made up. I mean, I made up all the names. I
Yeah.
don't use anybody's name that I knew.
Yeah.
And his character was developed because the special forces utilized a lot of our product. Remember one time we had a message come in from one of the special forces detachments, and they asked if we could revise our training plan. And it's like, well, I'm not sure exactly what they mean. And we contacted them and they said, could you make sure when they go through training that the interpreters understand that they can't be the first ones to go through the door all the time? And we had a hard charge an individual out there who was always trying to move up in the rack and stack and get in the door. And it's like, no, you're an asset. You have to wait. So that's where I came up with Abdullah's character.
Oh, that's great. It's such a good read. And folks, again, Frank's first book of this series of vital uh, interest is available online. Of course, you can. Frank, let me ask you this: what's the best site? What's the preferred site that our listeners should pick up a copy of your books? Where would you prefer they go? Because I know it's
Well,
everywhere. I've seen it. I picked up mine at Barnes and Nobles, but I mean, where would you? What's helpful to you?
well, I wish you would have asked me that before you had picked up one, but
Yeah.
yeah, Amazon seems to
Amazon.
always
Okay.
have it
Yeah, I'm
on
always
discount.
yeah, I'm always asking because I don't always know, and I know things change all the time with these online sites. So
Yeah.
yeah, if Amazon's your preferred, then I'll tell you what, I'll
But
pick up another couple today for some gifts.
well, there's another way to do it. And if anybody would like a signed copy,
Yeah, that's me. Yeah,
well,
I
they
want a
can
signed
go to
copy.
my webpage, frankdemithauthor.com. And at the very bottom, there's a part that says contact Frank. And my email address is there.
Okay.
If anybody wants a signed copy, all they have to do is go to my website, find that email address, send me an email, tell me where you heard about it, and then I will send them a signed copy, and it'll probably be less than any of the copies you can find online.
Yeah, that's fantastic. So definitely do that, folks. Go to frankdemithauthor.com, contact Frank at the bottom, and order your copies of both books. It would be fantastic at this point in the season as you're thinking about shopping for gifts. I can tell you, as a veteran, it's a good read. And as a GWAT veteran, I would say, kind of more just my own bias here. I think every one of us has spent some time in the last 20 years or so overseas will get a lot of interesting um, things out of this book. Very, very, we'll say reminiscent. And it's nice to know that the author is, of course, a fellow veteran, but like this is the fellow that was in charge of that program. And I think we all have a lot to be thankful to him for. So I really appreciate your time today. I do have to ask you one final fun thoughtful
Sure.
question here. There's no way you could have predicted where your life went when you join the service. There's no way you would have seen all of these moves, all of these pivots, and you adapted like a true veteran knows how to do. I have to ask this question. Knowing everything you went through, knowing exactly how it all played out, going back in time, if you had 1 minute with your younger self, what would you say besides I think one of the things you'd say right off the bat is take the plane, not the bus.
Yeah.
But other than that, what would you tell young Frank is he's about to embark on this incredibly challenging but so fascinating series of adventures?
I would have told myself, look for Beth first. Had I met my current wife, I would have only been married once. Of course, she's 4 years younger than me, so that might have been kind of awkward.
Yeah, that's wonderful, Frank. We'll have to clip that for your Valentine's card for her this year.
Well, she's the house commander and she knows
Yeah,
it.
yeah, household six. Yeah, we
Yeah,
saw.
I've been in charge of stuff all my life, and I told her, I said, you know what? It's on you. If you want me to help with anything, tell me. I'll do everything I can. But my decision making days
Yeah.
are beyond me.
Yeah, once you say I do, you're saying Wilco, right? Will comply.
Yep.
And you went right from an LTC down to a PFC, just like that.
Oh yeah. Well, the best advice I can I can give someone who's going to get married for the first time, you got to know 2 words. Yes, dear.
That's it.
Forget
Dear,
everything else.
yeah, dear, yes, dear.
Yep.
That's how it should be. That's fantastic. Well, Frank, thank you so much for this. This was such a treat for me personally. I enjoyed the first book. I'm looking forward to the next one. I'm going to go on right now and get my help me with my Christmas shopping as time's getting shorter for that. I know a lot of folks that will enjoy this, obviously, and I'm also going to look up that Budweiser jingle. I got to refresh my memory on the first one. You know.
Bum, 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 bum. Bum, 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 bum.
So, well, thank you so much, folks. Once again, sitting here with retired Army veteran Frank Demith and author of 2, and I'm sure more to follow, fascinating books. Make sure you check them all out and pick up a copy. Get your signed copies. That's always fun, right? Get a copy of that, whether it's for a gift or your own library. You just simply go to frankdemithauthor.com, and at the bottom, just hit contact Frank and let him know that you heard him on the Lima Charlie Show. So, sir, thanks again for your time. And folks, stay with us. We're just going to take a very short break. Stand by.